Hey guys, what's cracking? I've written up a script today because I tend to ramble, and I'm gonna get a strong and concise message off. We're gonna delve into something that's a little more serious and a little off tone for this channel, but in the current political climate, I feel an obligation to use whatever small voice and influence I have to try and make the world a better place. Right now, I don't think there's anything more important than talking about this. I realize that this is a video game channel where I play Pokemon, and maybe you won't take it that seriously because of that, but this is a topic that needs to be taken seriously. And if I feel like, if anything, if I didn't use this platform, that would be a disservice. If I lose my entire subscriber base and all the past 8 years of work or whatever because I made this video, but I change a couple people's minds or make people see things a little bit differently in the process, like, well worth it. This is maybe one of the most important causes of our lifetime, and I think it deserves anyone and everyone should be talking about this right now because this is the most important thing right now. So I did a lot of research on this. There's a lot of facts, and I'm gonna break this video into the facts and my opinions later. So everything I'm talking about is gonna be linked in the description below. Okay, but on May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis police officers arrested George Floyd, a 46-year-old black male, after an employee called 911 accusing him of buying goods with counterfeit currency. George Floyd was taken out of his car after leaving the store by police officers. When they arrived, I couldn't find any details on whether or not he was in fact using counterfeit currency or not, but to be completely frank with you guys, whether or not it was a criminal is not relevant or defining in this event. After being dragged out of his car, George Floyd was put on the ground with his hands behind his back and handcuffed. The man had clearly and effectively been detained. Officer Derek Chauvin of the Minneapolis Police Department then proceeded to use an unlawful amount of force, pinning Floyd's neck down with his knee and putting his full weight behind it. I won't link that video because it is graphic and some people may not want to accidentally click on it. But if that is something that you want to see, and maybe you do because you need to be aware that these things are happening, and that's maybe the best way to do it. Is there were several eyewitness cell phone recordings that clearly show a man that was slowly, excruciatingly being suffocated to death, pleading for his life and stating that he can't breathe as best as he could between gasps for almost 9 minutes. He then went unconscious and was pronounced dead at the hospital he was taken to. The issue here lies in the fact that the police officer clearly used a method of enforcement that he was not trained to use or authorized to use, targeting a black man who had already been successfully detained, and the force used directly caused that man's death. Since then, Derek Chauvin has been arrested for murder, and protests, riots, and looting have broken out across the U.S., as you may know from watching the news. But anti-riot protocols are being deployed across the country, and military action against civilians by the president, that is currently looming on the horizon. These are the facts. I also want to say the whole quote from President Trump of when the looting starts, the shooting starts, is actually a quote from I think a Miami sheriff in the 50s or 60s who was a well-known white supremacist. So our president is actually quoting white supremacists now. Great, but so here I'm gonna these are all the facts, and then I'm gonna talk now about my opinions on the matter. But so Derek Chauvin was arrested for murder, and I don't think that any person with a shred of humanity disagrees with that decision. Black Americans have been persecuted and treated with injustice throughout this country's long history, and racism is alive and well today, and you cannot deny that. You cannot argue against that. Racism is still here, and despite the progress that we have made, I am one of what I hope is a majority that understands that there is still a long, long road ahead. If your first issue, and this is kind of where I get a little dicey, but I wouldn't say dicey. I take that back. I'm not even going to say it's dicey. I'm going to say this is where I'm going to make my statement, and I'm not sorry if I piss people off. I hope I piss some people off by saying this because I think people need to hear it. It's such a touchy subject, but if your first issue lies with what is going on and how bad you think the looting and the rioting is, then perhaps without realizing it, you have unknowingly or knowingly allowed yourself to become a cog in a well-oiled machine of deeply ingrained systemic injustice against Black Americans. If you are more outraged by the property damage than at the loss of life at the hands of police brutality, then you have consented to being a part of a system that values physical commodities over human life. When black people protest peacefully, they are met with violence and death. When they cooperate with the police, they die. When they run away from the police, they die. When they are unarmed, they die. When they speak up, they die. When they are aggressive, they die. When they're defensive, they die. When they protest or peacefully or violently, they die. What else can they possibly do to fight for their rights to be an equal human in our societies? Citing people talk about, this pisses me off so much. People talk about the civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 60s and say this is how you should be doing it. Don't loot, don't riot. Martin Luther King himself, if that's who you're going to quote, Martin Luther King Jr. himself said, "The Negro's greatest stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action." If you find yourself siding against looting rather than against injustice and racism against blacks, then you are that white moderate who would rather a lack of tension than true justice and freedom for all the founding principles of this country. Pretty. I hope that, I don't know, it's intense stuff, but I also don't feel like I need to remind you guys that MLK, this symbol of peaceful protest and how successful it can be, was shot and killed. So, yes, he did incredible things with his peaceful protest. He himself acknowledged the white moderate is the problem more than anything else, because they choose to, if you are not actively anti-racist, then you are racist by default at this point in society. And that's so divisive to say, I realize, but it really, really is true. So as for protesting peacefully, I personally side with those, for my own opinion, I personally side with those who are fighting for their rights as human beings. And until they achieve justice they deserve, I think none of us have any right to judge the actions by which they go about trying to attain what they have exhausted every other measure to achieve to no avail. MLK protested peacefully. He died. And there's still racism today. These people protest, they die, they run, they die. You can't tell me that the looting is the problem. That's the problem here. We need to fight for those who have been lost and who are still going to be lost on the road to equality. Names like Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner and Michael Brown, people like that are still being killed all the time by the very group made to protect society, which leads me to my next point. Some people talk about the way police officers are mostly good and there are some bad apples. And I understand this, and I agree with this to an extent. Being a police officer is a hard and difficult job, and especially in some areas of the country when many of these people put their safety on the line for the well-being of others, and I think those people should be commended for doing so. But the protocols for handling misuse of power entrusted to these police officers with them are not enforced to nearly the standard that they should be. The police officer force cannot be a job where you are allowed to have some bad apples. Some bad apples, you know. I hate that when people say like, oh, I mean, most of them are fine, but there's only some bad apples. We just need to punish those, because would you want a bad engineer to build the plane that you're going to fly across the ocean in? Or how about a bad pilot to pilot that plane, who might put it in the side of a mountain? He's a bad pilot, whatever. What about a bad surgeon to perform a life-threatening procedure on you? The police need to be held to that same standard. You can't. It's one of those jobs where, you know what, maybe you can't have bad apples in this job. Like, people die. That's not a job where you can have bad apples. So I understand it's a hard job, but there's a standard, and when that standard isn't met, justice needs to be served. I'm not sure what the road is to get there exactly, but the road needs to get there. Colin Kaepernick tried to protest police brutality. He asked veterans this is something that I feel like gets lost, but he asked veterans at the time if it would be okay with them how he could protest police brutality on the field, and they suggested don't leave during the national anthem, don't sit. How about you just kneel? You're still showing respect, but you're making a statement. In your protesting cause. He was martyred. He was blackballed from the NFL, and when he exercised his right as an American in a protest in a peaceful way, without showing disrespect to the military, in my opinion, he was socially lynched. He tried peace. They did, and so many people didn't want to listen. The amount of outcry against Colin Kaepernick kneeling to the anthem was absolutely absurd. The dude tried to find a way to protest his cause. He wasn't protesting against the military. He was protesting against police brutality. and using his platform to do it, which is absolutely, I think, the right thing to do. Perhaps the rioting seems extreme. Perhaps all this seems extreme, but it only seems extreme, in my opinion, to those who are unaware of the exhaustive list of things that still end up in injustice and death of Black Americans. None of this is made better by the fact that we have an orange imbecile in the White House who would rather state that there are some very good people in a crowd of white supremacists with tiki torches than speak out against a clear racist cop that killed a man in cold blood. That's a big can of worms that I'm not going to get into, but that issue is there. Please don't make this just me talking into a box for 10 minutes. I myself am donating my own money as well as the little money I've made on YouTube to the Bail Project. It's an organization that helps bail out those in protests who have been arrested. The money that is donated here can go a long way, as once that bail case ends, they can reuse it towards the next one. So your money there can go a long way, and I did a lot of research into how I cannot be just words and how I can do action. So I'm going to also provide links to where you can look at all the possible ways, hopefully some possible ways that you can help. If you guys want to drop comments in the description below and talk about ways that you're doing it, I would absolutely love to hear and have that conversation. If you want to go to protests, I encourage you to do that. If you can't protest and don't have enough money to donate, that's okay. That's not for everyone. I get that. Some people just don't have those means. But any way you can continue to generate support for this cause by having those difficult conversations with important people, or just talking with your loved ones and your friends, trying to change someone's mind, those conversations, those matter too. I hope to leave you with this, but that conversation, it needs to be forced. It's uncomfortable. I know it's uncomfortable. Do you know what is less comfortable? Injustice, oppression, racism. Racism is real, it is alive, and it is kicking. And maybe the only thing left to do is kick right back.